to lisp at one another with great desire. God, what the hell is Luttrell on? What is it? Is it really Australia Day down there, down under, Julian? Well, happy Australia Day. Good day, mate. Don't be eaten by a shark when you're bobbing on the beach. I think, or whatever it is you say down there. And Luttrell, I mean,
This
Luttrell.
no, this is a knife. This is a knife, Norm. This is a knife.
Okay, don't cut me, mate. Oh, hey, Luttrell, what are you smoking this morning? Morning, this wonderful morning. I mean, it's Friday. Tomorrow's Saturday, a day of rest, at least in my household, and I am looking forward to it because this week my head's exploding. I woke up this morning thinking, is it Fort Sumter all over again? Is it? And Mike, you were about to say something, and then the cat got your tongue. Well, please, cat.
I was just clearing the windshield fog off my glasses, you know.
So Mike's not feeling well today, everybody. Hugs and kisses to Mike. And Mike's turning 34 soon, so he's starting to feel superannuated. Mike, double that, and you got my age, pal. You talk to me when you're... Oh, look at him. Now he's doing the grandpa look. Hey, Fort Sumter, April 14th, 1861. Regional tensions in the United States. There's an old military fortress on Fort Sumter on the island outside of Charleston, built after the War of 1812 to repel British, at or about the time of the War of 1812 with Great Britain, to protect against British invasions. The South is fixing to succeed, and suddenly a northern brigade seeks to restock the federal fort at Fort Sumter, and shots are fired from the shore of South Carolina, landing at Fort Sumter. The opening shots of the American Civil War, a war that lasted 4 years and consumed 600,000 American lives, pitting brothers against brothers. And it wasn't the only war in American history that pitted brothers against brothers. I'm reading, some American history textbooks, and there's one horrible story about a family in the American Revolutionary War. 4 brothers. 3 fought as loyalists. 1 fought on behalf of the emerging colonies. All 4 of them lost their lives in the war. I say that because, bloodshed is part and parcel of the American experience, and we have had violent conflagrations and conflicts before. Are we about to have another one down in Eagle Pass, Texas? Joe Biden, well, I was going to say Joe Biden laid down the gauntlet, but what would that look like in his case? Honey, can you find my tea? I need a spoon for my oatmeal. I want it now. No, he tried to act a little more presidential. Greg Abbott, that razor wire comes down tomorrow, Biden said last night. And Abbott says no mas. And here's the issue. Eagle Pass, Texas, on the Rio Grande, migrants crossing in great numbers. Abbott believes that the United States government is failing in its responsibility to protect, secure the border, and enforce American immigration laws. And as a result, his charges, his constituents, the people of Texas, are placed at risk. Oh my God, who put a butt plug in the House Minority Leader's ass? I mean, he's like right up there with Joe Biden. Joe, you want raisins with your oatmeal? That's what he's saying there. But in any case, so you've got Abbott saying the government's failed to do its job, and he instructs the National Guard under his direction in Texas to place concertina wire or razor wire along the border at Eagle Pass to prevent migrants from crossing. Federal immigration officials say, no, you can't do that. He says, I'm doing it. They go to court, and the United States Supreme Court ultimately, on an interlocutory emergency basis, sides with the federal government, saying you got to take that razor wire down. Biden orders Border Patrol agents in to do it. Abbott says you're not coming. We're not going to let you do it. Biden yesterday says, oh, it's going to happen, and so now we're at an oh or what moment. It's going to happen, or what? Now, Abbott wrote a letter, which we discussed yesterday, trying to justify his behavior by saying that and I'm pulling out my Constitution, under Article 1st, Section 10, Clause 3, a state has the ability even to engage in war if actually invaded. It can do so out from under the authority of the federal government. Abbott's claiming an invasion in this movement of migrants and justifying his conduct in defiance of federal orders. Joe Biden is claiming the United States Constitution and federal laws, including laws giving illegal immigrants legal status, having certain statutory rights, supersede the actions of the state, and this is a federal policy matter. Now you've got two men, each with armed forces at their disposal, asserting conflicting interpretations of the United States Constitution and what the rights and responsibilities are, what their rights and responsibilities are. Sounds to me a lot like 1861, when Southern states took the view that the United States was, as it said, United States, and that as a state could enter the Union, a state could succeed. Now, Abbott's not exactly saying we're succeeding, but what he is saying is that the federal government is failing, and as a result, he has certain residual powers granted to him by the United States Constitution. But here's where the rubber meets the road. Even though the National Guard in Texas right now reports to Abbott, there is authority in the United States for the president to take command of the National Guard to enforce federal laws. So on Biden's desk today will, I'm certain, be a draft of an order transferring command of the Texas National Guard out from beneath Greg Abbott to Joe Biden. What are those soldiers going to do? What are the boots on the ground going to do when Abbott says, I want to protect your home against Joe Biden and policies that result in a destruction of your home with this invasion? When those soldiers hear that now their loyalties are under the Constitution and laws of the land have been transferred to obeying Joe Biden, and they're going to be told to take down that concertina wire while Abbott is saying, no, you're not going to do that. So are we going to have battling militias? It seems to me that there is a substantial likelihood that there will be shots fired in anger in Eagle Pass today. I'm not saying that this will be necessarily the prelude to a civil war, but what I am saying is there's a deep enough divide in the country about what to do about immigration that you get a sense now that there are issues around which people could polarize, and those issues would polarize around their perception or their ideas of the role of states in securing the welfare of individuals in their community. Who's got more, Tip O'Neill, former House Speaker Tip O'Neill from Massachusetts, once famously said, all politics are local. And if that's the case, that would seem to tip the balance in favor of states being the repository of the police power. That is, the power to assure the health, education, safety, and welfare of its inhabitants. But yet, since the Civil War amendments, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, the federal government has been ascendant. And Article 6 of the Constitution talks about federal laws being the supreme law of the land. So we have a constitutional conflict here of fundamental import. We have angry people. We have a country divided on an issue. We have guns in the hands of people trained to use them along a border where one person says there's an invasion, and the other person says, come on down. I have no idea what's going to happen next, but all eyes will be on Eagle Pass this weekend, and for good reasons.
There's chatter online. People appear to be concerned that this deadline that President Biden has issued is setting the stage for some sort of false flag operation to declare martial law. And taken to the logical extreme, Norm, why would that matter?
Who's going to declare martial law?
Well, the election, right?
Oh my goodness, Biden's going to declare martial law?
So the federal government would declare martial law, and based on some sort of kinetic or hot conflict that emerges at the border. So I think that many of the right of center populists, I don't want to call them talking heads because it sounds condescending, but for lack of a better phrase at the moment, and do forgive me if you're watching. They are encouraging as much intelligent discernment as possible on this situation.
Yeah, I'm not sure that there's going to be this would not be a call for martial law in my view on Biden's behalf. If Biden tried to declare martial law over this, I would say it's time to evoke Article 25 of the the 25th Amendment to the United States Constitution and say he's unfit for office. We have a migrant crisis there. We have conflicting authorities. We have the federal government. This is almost like Selma. Almost like enforcement of federal civil rights laws in the 60s. You had Alabama refusing to segregate its schools. So I think it was Eisenhower or maybe sent in the National Guard to help it along. In this case, we have passions as deep, maybe not as deeply rooted historically as the legacy of race was in the United States at that time. But we have the real potential for violence here. And, there's an interesting story on X this morning. Robert Kennedy has come out in support of Abbott, as have a number of states. And this is what makes me think that this is a polarizing event, sufficient to create something like a civil war. I don't think there's a succession movement afoot right now. I do think, however, there is a growing sense that the federal government fails fundamentally at tasks best left to the state, and it could be what I would call a constructive succession movement. We're not actually leaving, the states might say to the federal government, but you have left the helm. They will say to the feds, you have left the ship of state asunder to float on roiling seas, and as a result, we're suffering, and we're going to take back our own sovereignty to care and care for our own people. Stay tuned. Over at The Hague in the Netherlands at noon Greenwich Mean Time today, an American judge on behalf of the International Court of Justice is going to issue a preliminary ruling expected to condemn Israel for violating a genocide pact in the manner in which it is conducting its war against Hamas. You will recall, I hope, that on October 7th of this year, Hamas members stormed across the Israeli border, killing 1,200 people, kidnapping 240 or so, mutilating children, grandmothers, women. They still hold, I believe, several hundred of these people hostage, and they are somewhere in Gaza. Israel has responded furiously with a vow to eradicate Hamas, and there has been an ugly and violent conflict simmering in the region now for months. As many as 26,000, I think, Palestinians have been killed. Those who support Palestinians claim that Israel is engaging in genocide and that it is engaged in wholesale and indiscriminate slaughter of innocents. Israel contends that Hamas is using the Palestinian civilians as human shields, and that they are trying to respond in a measured manner to avoid civilian casualties while seeking to accomplish its mission of eradicating Hamas. Both sides obviously have their positions. Somehow South Africa decided it was a good idea to go to the International Criminal Court and condemn Israel for Hamas. So they filed a motion. There have been arguments, and a preliminary ruling will be made today. There is no appeal from the International Criminal Court. It is the penultimate sort of non-governmental international organization that issues judgments that become, as it were, aspirational goals, or the so-called conscience of the world, of the emerging global consensus. So you can't appeal from the International Criminal Court. Neither can the International Criminal Court enforce its judgments. It has no army to call upon. It has no enforcement mechanism. It has no real sanctions as to Israel. Israelite Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says, well, good for the International Criminal Court. We're going to continue on. I think the International Criminal Court will embolden critics of Israel and other governments to impose sanctions on Israel for its actions as against Hamas in Gaza. And this fight will go on for how long? I don't know. I don't know how long Israel can sustain the logistics of the fight, how long it'll have material sufficient, the ordnance necessary to continue to pound away at Hamas. From my perspective, Hamas is sort of like cockroaches in the kitchen. When you decide to take them out, you take them out. And I think Israel has been patient for far too long with that group, and whatever it takes to get rid of Hamas is what should be done. But I recognize that puts me in a minority view with many in the West, and that Hamas is about probably to declare victory, in the sense that they won't be eradicated. Israel will be forced to stand down, and the stalemate will continue with indiscriminate bloodshed by terrorists directed at people in Israel, because they are, after all, Jews.
The alternative, of course, Norm, is that whatever this ruling is, so the article that we have here from the New York Sun, written by Benny Avni, talks about the, I guess, cautious optimism of Israel regarding the Hague's decision. And I'm quoting here, quote, "I think the ICJ's decision will be somewhat parve," a former legal advisor for Israel's foreign ministry, Alan Baker, tells The Sun, referring to the Jewish term for kosher food that is neither meat nor dairy. They are unlikely to completely forego a decision. Instead, they could call on Israel to lower the number of casualties and amp up humanitarian deliveries, end quote. Israel could live with such a decision, as it contends it is already doing its utmost to minimize civilian casualties. It also delivers more aid to Gaza than is approved by the Israeli public. Family members of hostages held by Hamas blocked the Kerem Shalom crossing into the Strip Thursday. So what I'm getting at here is that perhaps this is, the Hague is proving itself to be more of a paper tiger. I don't know what this does to further stress geopolitical divisions and alliances in the region. But if Israel takes the position, based on whatever the ruling is, that they can live with, amping up humanitarian aid and minimizing civilian casualties, that's actually a win for Israel.
Here's what I want to know. Where's the International Criminal Court on condemning Hamas for its activities on October 7th? They get a pass somehow because they're not a nation state. They aspire to some sort of independence, and who holds them accountable? But I hear what you're saying, and I hope there is some intermediate position from the International Criminal Court. I have my doubts. I hope I am proven wrong.
Hey, look at before we move on. Number one, Junior Coltrane agrees with you, Norm.
Damn, let's stop the broadcast here at 17 minutes, 27 seconds in. We have accomplished our mission today. We have persuaded someone that we have insight, and we are correct.
So before we move on to the Alabama stuff, BTL over on Rumble asks, is Texas disobeying an order from the Supreme Court? And I think this is in reference to adding razor wire and amping up defenses of the southern border. Hans, I believe you have given a pretty quick conclusion in the negative that Texas is not violating the order. I actually agree with that reading. Again,
tell me why.
So the stay of the injunction, well, I guess not the stay, but the pulling off of the injunction against the federal government was narrow on the issue of Texas using razor wire to support its efforts to secure its border. And what they're in court about is the federal government's ability, legally so, to come in and remove these implements that they've put at the border. The ruling from the Supreme Court was that the administration may indeed remove these items from the border. If we're looking at a very narrow and technical reading of that ruling, one may come to the conclusion, as I sort of do in this situation, that there's nothing in that order that says Texas may not continue to put wire back up. However, if it's lawful for the federal government to take it down, the negative implication of that would be that to continue to put it up there is some sort of interference with a court order,
or to not let the feds come in to take it down. I mean, Mike, I love you, but I wouldn't want to be in your hands on defense of that contempt citation. That is a defense that is what lawyers might refer to as special pleading. BTL is Texas was not. Texas. The Supreme Court didn't say jump twice, and Texas said, no, I'm not doing it. So, it's not that open a disobedience, but I think it is defying the Supreme Court. And is defiance the same thing as disobeying? So in a contempt situation, there has to be a clear and definite order. The person who is accused of violating it has to know about it. So, I'll take Mike's point to suggest that there may be a little bit of wiggle room. But once again, let's say that Texas is blatantly disregarding the Supreme Court's order. What you going to do about it?
That's where I'm deriving, I think, my confidence on that sort of technical reading norm is that from a practical perspective, we looked at the issue, we looked at the way that the government argued its position here, and it's basically, the assumption that people are already here and it's taking no action to prevent them from coming in is the real issue, and that's not been ruled on, right?
Well, let's see what happens. I think it's tense. I think that if you're a soldier, if you're a member of the National Guard today, you might be in the uncomfortable decision of having to decide who to listen to, who to obey, President Biden or Greg Abbott. And if I understand politics at all, I think Biden will do his level best to avoid forcing people to make that difficult decision. But having issued an ultimatum yesterday, he's going to be hard pressed to back down today. So many years ago, my office represented a man named Daniel Webb, who was on Connecticut's death row. He was on death row for the rape and murder of a bank president in a Hartford Park one afternoon. And we undertook the task of appealing his conviction and appealing his sentence of death. There were almost 300 pages of briefs written, a day-long worth of arguments in the Connecticut Supreme Court, and we won only one issue of the 19 or so that we raised, and that was that we got a remand for further proceedings on the method and manner of killing Dan Webb. A bizarre piece of work. At the time that we filed our briefs, and mind you, this is about 30 years ago, the manner and method of killing a person in Connecticut under imposition of the death penalty was electrocution. During the pendency of the proceedings, it changed to lethal injection. And so we, of course, had argued that the state had no business killing its citizens, that even Thomas Hobbes, and we argued this to the Supreme Court, even Thomas Hobbes, a social contract theorist in the 17th century, who created a very powerful government, an absolutist form of government, said that in order to secure our lives and property, we yielded all power to the government. Even he said that when the sovereign tries to kill you, it's gone too far, and you can strike back as a matter of justice and as a matter of right. We took the position that the state couldn't kill its citizens, that was that frustrated the very purpose of the social contract, that if the purpose of entering into civil society was to save your life, you'd never consent to your life being taken, and therefore the death penalty was illogical and wrong. Supreme Court swatted that one away like a fly at a picnic. But it did remand saying, okay, we need to have an evidentiary hearing on lethal injection. And so back to the trial court we went for 7 days of hearings on whether using a lethal cocktail of 3 drugs, a barbiturate, a muscle relaxant, and something to induce a heart attack would constitute cruel and unusual punishment. Those hearings, I had to get out of those hearings in the middle of them, or toward the end of them. And I think after 5 or 6 days, when Mr. Webb was discovered to have had an escape plot planned with people outside involving the shooting of guards, and I was a potential witness, and found myself in the course of the Webb proceedings on the witness stand taking the Fifth Amendment as to what I knew. But what I learned in the course of the proceedings was that, if you were going to kill somebody, if you reach the conclusion that the state can kill, lethal injection wasn't a bad way to go. I've lost animals. I've had to put animals down, and I've I've been present with dogs that I loved with my whole heart, breathe their last when, in response to an illness that was wasting them, we decided to put their lives and to end their suffering and put their lives to an end. And I concluded that if you're going to do it, lethal injection was the way to do it. Well, of course, now we've got problems with lethal injection. People don't die right away. The politics of lethal injection are difficult. Some of the drugs are manufactured in Europe and they won't sell them within the United States for fear that they will find themselves in the hands of American prison officials who will use them to kill. And yet we still have states and the federal government who insists that killing people is right. So Alabama decided to do something different. Because there were problems with the 3-drug cocktail, they were going to use nitrogen gas to kill. And in fact, they did
Not just
last
that
night.
there were problems with nitrogen gas generally. They actually tried to execute him using that lethal injection cocktail in late 2022 and were unsuccessful. So they have opted, in the case of Smith, to use nitrogen gas.
But here's where this is unfortunately, though, as always, I go one direction then turn another. It seems like nothing ever stays nailed down in my mind. I'm always fussing things. When I read the story about Kevin Eugene Smith's execution, I just wasn't as outraged by it as his lawyer was. I mean, the state had elected to kill him, and the lawyer complained that he gasped for breath for a minute or two, and must have suffered terror in the moments before his death. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's what death is. I mean, no one gets out of here alive. All of us fear death, and all of us hope for a good death. Lucky is the person who lays their head on a pillow and dies in their sleep. Unfortunate is the person who suffers, and has to endure agony in the moments and hours, days, perhaps, and weeks before their death. Eugene Smith had some anxiety for a couple of minutes as he gasped his last. I'm not sure that makes the death cruel and unusual. If we're going to have a death penalty, nitrogen gas just doesn't seem like a bad way to go. I mean, I don't know what your take is on it, Mike, but I find myself strangely unmoved by the story. And candidly, I've come full circle on the death penalty in 30 years, whereas I used to be unalterably opposed to it. I've seen enough now in the criminal justice system to conclude that some people just need killing.
Yeah, I think a younger version of me would have instinctively gravitated toward being against the death penalty. I can't say that's true anymore. That doesn't mean, however, that reading the details of an execution, um, that I'm so callous as to not sense, sense what's happening. And I think it's we talk a lot on this podcast about the monopoly on violence that the state enjoys, and this is one of those domains, Norm, right? And so I think I'm always reminded, marriage is a form of cruel and unusual death. Funny.
You know my wife, do you, Junior? Yeah.
Reminded,
Tell
Norm.
me how well you don't know her in a biblical sense. I hope. Hey, does Dawn know something we don't? I mean, obviously she does. Have they ruled already, and we missed that? They ordered Israel to issue a report.
Hey, squirrel. I'm just kidding. I was talking about the death penalty shit.
Yeah,
I don't
go ahead.
I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know if they've ordered issue. This is sort of what I was talking about, a paper tiger, right? I mean, whatever they're gonna do is good. They don't have the power to compel them to do anything. They have the persuasive authority and the mind share of people that are paying attention to that. They may ask them to do certain things. Dawn, if there is a report, be interested in the anatomy of the report. But for what I was saying, Norm, in this
Sorry, I cut you off there.
yeah, in this circumstance, though, I'm reminded that this is the state wielding the power to end a life. Okay, that's it, right? I don't know that I'm so bothered by that because there are circumstances, and Kenneth Eugene Smith being executed. Well, the attempt to execute him once didn't go through, so that to me is sort of an aberration on the norm, right? He just wouldn't die. So the fact that he struggled in the nitrogen gas and the nitrogen epoxia methodology is not altogether surprising to me. but I'm always balanced again by this notion of the federal use of that monopoly on violence or the state's use of the monopoly on violence against citizens, right? And not that he
No,
did
I get that, and it isn't.
did not, forego, and he didn't have due process or any of that, but that is the ass end of our justice system. This is the end of the line. That is the end of the value chain, as it were, right?
Yeah, and it is an awesome power, and the state does have a monopoly on the use of lethal force, and it is an open question whether it should ever be used against its citizens. There are powerful arguments against it, and there may be better arguments against it than for it, because I think that the best argument I've heard against the death penalty is there are erroneous applications of it. What if you kill a factually innocent person? What could be worse than that? The lead United States due process decision in Ray Winship says it's better that 10 guilty persons should go free than one should be convicted. All the more so when it comes time to executing people.
I mean,
You can't set a dead man free if you realize you've made a mistake.
I think that's just a bit too rhetorical. And certainly because of our standards of justice on this stream and on this platform, right? We're not even necessarily sure how to define what justice is at this point, right?
Well, we don't. Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right.
The
Well,
belief-
anyhow, so there's the debate.
Uh,
Eugene Smith is no more.
Jackson Barrett says the guillotine is relatively painless, which is also, I guess, don't have experience with that one, but I'm sure that if, painless and humane were what we were going for, certainly the guillotine is a really quick way to go.
I guess, and it's also a great public spectacle and entertaining, and I don't know that we want to do that. I think I'm just jaundiced about this as I've gotten older. I mean, I'm now at an age where I go to more funerals than weddings, and I'm watching my friends.
All right, I had to finish that joke.
Oh, I'm sorry?
Unless the guillotine is built by Boeing.
Whoops, the blade missed. It got a finger. A door fell off. But I just, death is cruel. I mean, there's just no two ways about it. And if you're going to have a penalty of death, all this fussing and fuming about having the optimal way to die strikes me as a little bit precious. And so I'm of two or three minds on this case, and no surprise there.
Perfectly. I think that's what we do here is we oscillate, right? It's possible to hold, multiple truths in one's mind at a time. And then, whatever the density of the dominating one is where we tend to go. I think that's why it can seem at times as though, certain positions are opposite to those that we've taken in days prior. I think yesterday was a perfect example of that regarding the ones carrying themselves as an officer of the court versus as a criminal defendant or a civil defendant, right? But I think that, good morning, Kishan Petgrave. I have not seen you here before. Welcome.
Oh man, Kishan Petgrave works as a vet in a veterinarian's office, and I'm not with a last name like that. You must get a lot of jokes if that's actually your last name, Mr. Petgrave. Have you seen my dog Fido? Yeah, he's in the backyard. But in any case, welcome to Law and Legitimacy. So we've talked our way through your week, folks. It's a low energy end to a high energy week. Mike's not feeling well. I'm confused about the death penalty, confused about Hamas and Israel. I'm confused about what's going on at Eagle Pass, Texas, and generally apprehensive about the world and what's going on in 2024. That's why we broadcast every day, because we're trying to get our bearings and we need your help. So thank you for listening, Mike. Where do people find us? What can they expect in the newsletter? And are we going to enable comments on the newsletter?
Yeah, we'll do some comments on the newsletter. I think if you're going to where the newsletter is housed at lawandlegitimacy.com, you should be able to comment. If not, I'll check on that this weekend. We've got several things being published this weekend. One is our long form interview with Pete Atkinson. We did that a couple of weeks back. That will come, and we will actually host that on the website at LawPod Daily. That'll just be embedded there, and it'll also go out in the newsletter. Norm, you've written an essay or two. I know I read one from you yesterday that will be published as well. And then if you're, interested in the audio only versions of these daily streams, which by the way, these daily streams are on YouTube, on X, and on Rumble. We simulcast to all three of those places every weekday, Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. If you want the audio only, go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Overcast, wherever you find premium podcasts. But do follow us on X at LawPod Daily. We're trying to build our following there. So Norm, that's all I've got. Thank you guys for staying patient with me this morning as I battle through, the sickness.
Oh Mikey's not feeling well. Send him your love and kisses. Send him your hugs. And come back Monday morning. I'm off to court where life is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. But I wouldn't have it any other way. See you on Monday.
AMF, yo-yo.
AMF.